Hey everybody, today I'm talking about my top 10 punishing board games. Now, what do I mean by punishing board games? What I mean is that these games go that extra mile to make your life that much more difficult. Because, to be honest, making this list wasn't the easiest because of the blurred lines between, say, punishing games and just difficult games or mean games in general. But these ones are mostly driven by the game itself trying to, again, cause problems for the players. And if you want a list based purely on mean games, then I have recorded a top 10 based on that, so check out my channel for that video. But before I get started on these 10 punishing games and a few honourable mentions, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10, I'm going to start off with a small box card game called Archaeology, the New Expedition. Now, in theory, this is a simple set collection game where you are collecting cards into your hand and then trying to trade them in as sets. And basically, you've got these different kind of Egyptian artifacts. The more you collect of a certain set, when you trade them in, they're going to be worth more points. But where the punishing part of this game comes in is in that main deck of artifacts, there are going to be these sandstorm cards, and randomly those sandstorm cards are going to come out and they are going to force all the players to discard, I believe, half of their cards rounded up. So there's this real kind of push your luck tension to the game of, yes, I want to build up these bigger sets, but the more I'm building them up, the riskier it's going to get in terms of those sandstorms coming out and wasting all of my effort. And typically, as you can imagine with these kind of games, due to the random nature, it feels like you get whacked really hard, lose all your cards, think it's going to be a while until the next sandstorm comes out, so let's build up my hand again, and then all of a sudden you are blindsided again by another sandstorm. It's just the typical way that these games seem to resolve, but it's a lot of fun. Again, very simple set collection stuff, but with that extra twist of those sandstorms coming out, it just completely makes the game feel very punishing, to be honest. So that is Archaeology, the New Expedition, at number 10. At number 9, I have Eco, which is another small box card game. Now this one's a little bit more driven by the players, but the game itself is going to facilitate players making pretty, nasty moves and forcing you to take cards that you do not want to take. So this game is all about trying to recycle these cards in your hand, where you have, I believe it's 4 different suits of goods. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to build up this hand of cards, trade them in against these recycling plants in order to get victory points. But the twist is that whenever you play next to these recycling plants, then you have to pick up cards that are deposited beneath them at kind of every time an action is taken. And on top of that, you do have a very strict limit of cards in your hand. I believe it's only 5 or 6 cards. And whenever you are forced to pick up more cards, then those cards are going to be added onto a pile of negative points. And, again, sod's law, the way that the game works, you're going to keep on getting sets into your hand that you're not quite ready to play yet, but you're forced to play. And then when you play things, you're forced to pick up a whole bunch more cards that, again, you do not want. So it's a very tight balancing act. Sometimes you need to know when to kind of overcompensate by delivering goods just so you can thin out your hand, and getting through the game without getting punished by the game itself is a very difficult thing to overcome. So yeah, almost inevitable that you're going to get some negative points that way. Again, it is a little bit more player driven because you can leave traps and kind of force your opponent to take cards that you don't want yourself, but there's no way around it, and the game is going to make sure that happens, hence why it made the list. So that is our Eco at number 9. At number 8, I have Spirit Island, which is an immensely complex cooperative game where you are controlling these spirits to try and fight off these invaders. Now, a big portion of it making this list is probably because I am terrible at this game, so I'm really bad at it, and that's probably why I find it so punishing. But I think the game itself, makes it difficult for you. Yeah, it's a difficult game, but I think the way that the kind of colonists spread around the board just makes you feel like you are really fighting an uphill battle at all times, because you are kind of slowly making progress, and then all of a sudden all that progress is just undone as these units just keep on spreading their influence and beating all your units down and so on. So I definitely feel like I am again, fighting that uphill battle at all times in this game, and hence why, a game like this, you want it to be difficult, but sometimes I personally found it was a little bit too difficult, but maybe that's my personal skills. So that is Spirit Island at number 8. At number 7, I have a lesser known game called Michael Strogoff. Now, this is a game where you are trying to travel from the left side of the board to the right side of the board. And as you travel, you are going to go through these terrain types which force you to draw cards. And these cards are going to punish you in one way or another, at least if you get these duplicate symbols on these cards. So it acts like almost like a push your luck game where if you have single symbols revealed, it's fine. But as soon as you get a duplicate, something bad is going to happen, or several bad things are going to happen. And it's all about managing this hand of cards to try and overcome these threats, doing it in the right order, knowing what you can take and knowing what you need to get rid of immediately. It really does feel like you can get stuck in the mud in this game, because once something bad happens, it tends to be a slippery slope into being many bad things happening. And again, it does really make you feel like you're getting battered through the entire experience. And you've even got some of these permanent deficits that you can't even overcome, which makes it that much more difficult. So I like the game mechanically wise, but the actual overall experience just made me feel pretty exhausted because it was just that hard going in terms of just being battered by the game itself. But it's still a good game. But I think maybe a lot of people bounced off of it because of almost the vibe of the game being so damn punishing. So that is Michael Strogoff at number 7. At number 6, I have a pretty wacky game called Galaxy Trucker. So the idea of this game is very cool, where you are frantically building this spaceship on this real-time basis, grabbing these tiles and trying to get everything you need on your ship, such as these guns and kind of the cockpits to hold your astronauts, kind of speed boosters, batteries, everything you need, even like cargo holds, so you can grab these goods as you go on your journey. So you can plan as well as you like in this game, but the problem is when it comes to the kind of second phase in the game, all your plans are going to go out the window as you are travelling through these kind of meteor fields and fighting off these space pirates. And the interesting thing about this game is that these meteors are going to attack you based on this kind of somewhat randomised mechanism and just completely pick your ship apart. And I love the way that if those kind of meteors or asteroids hit those exact sweet spot on your spaceship, then you can lose a whole wing of your spaceship in a single move. All your batteries, all your cargo, all your crew just go completely fade into oblivion, and you'll not have them for the remainder of your journey. So again, you can plan as well as you like, but it's probably going to go awry. Yes, it's chaotic, it's crazy, but it's a lot of fun, and that kind of punishing nature of the game is inbuilt into the game. I've had several games of this where, in the first couple of minutes of the second phase, all your plans are out the window because you've just been battered in that exact spot you didn't want to be. So a lot of fun. Again, it's not going to be for everybody because it is quite chaotic, but no doubt is it punishing. So that is Galaxy Trucker at number 6. At number 5, I have Peloponnes, which in theory is a pretty simple little bidding and resource management style game as you're trying to manage your population, feed your people, get resources to buy new tiles and so on. But the game does have a pretty distinct twist where at the end of every phase in the game you're going to be revealing these tokens, which will be a kind of a countdown mechanism until something very bad happens. So you do have a little bit of forewarning as to when something bad could happen, but because of the random nature in which these tiles come out, you could get hit with a couple in a row, which will just completely take you by surprise. And these things can be mechanisms such as losing a third of your food, which of course you're going to need to feed your people, and if you don't have the food at the right time, all those people are going to die. Or you've got to have certain resources or lose tiles that you've invested in, lose excess goods, even lose, basically you can lose everything based on these countdown mechanisms. So it's all ingrained into the game, and I suppose without that part of the game, it's still a decent game, but it's not as interesting, and that kind of constant threat and dread of something bad happening isn't quite there. But I tend to like these punishing style games where that punishing aspect is kind of at the forefront of the game experience, and I think Peloponnes is one of the strongest of that category, and hence why it's at number 5. At number 4, I have Lord of the Rings: The Living card game, which is another cooperative game. This one, you have kind of an ensemble of Middle-earth characters that you're trying to overcome these different scenarios by working with not only your own team, but obviously your teammates' teams as well. Now, all of these characters have their own strengths and weaknesses. Like, for example, some of them are really good at kind of scouting out the mission, some of them are really good at combat, etc. And you need to know when to kind of tie them up on their different phases in the game, because if you're exploring, then you're not going to be fighting and so on. Now, the difficulty is that when you go through these phases, if you don't kind of contribute enough into that particular effort, then you're going to get pretty much battered by the game. So, for example, if you're not exploring enough, then your threat marker might go up, which is one of the kind of barometers of when the game might end. And also you might get kind of new locations that come out, which can give you horrible kind of burdens that you need to overcome and make your life more difficult. And then on top of that, you've got the combat phase of the game, which I personally find very difficult, and I'm rubbish at it, but I always struggle to overcome that phase because the monsters you're fighting are generally quite powerful, even without this extra mechanism of these shadow cards that come out that make your life that much more difficult, because you could spend a lot of your efforts kind of boosting up your characters by equipping them with weapons and stuff, and then these monsters come out and completely just say, you know what, you can't use your weapon this turn, which you think, when you're in that situation, what can I do? I'm going to take some heavy hits here, and it's always going to be an uphill battle from them. So it's a bit like Michael Strogoff in the sense that once things go bad, they can become even worse in a quick fashion. So you can go in a very downward spiral pattern in this game pretty rapidly. But still, wonderfully designed game, very versatile in all the different scenarios you can play. Again, if you love Lord of the Rings or Middle-earth in general, then I definitely recommend giving this game a go. And particularly if you like clever card play and scenario story-based gaming. So again, but be prepared for it to be very difficult and for the game to hit you pretty hard. So that is Lord of the Rings: The Living card game at number 4. At number 3, I have The Grizzled. This is another cooperative game, actually a very simple game in theory, where you and your teammates, which are kind of representing these troops in World War I, I believe, are kind of in the trenches trying to overcome these kind of traumatic things happening to you. You're playing these cards in this row, and these cards have several bits of information on them, such as the kind of the weather type or the terrain type, or these little symbols on them like these gas masks or like shells. And what you're trying to do is that you're trying to play a sequence of these cards without trying to get, I believe it's 3 of a kind, whether that be the symbols on them or the the terrain types themselves. Because if you do that, then something bad is going to happen. You get these kind of really horrible punishing cards that are difficult to shake off, which can make your life get that much trickier to overcome the rest of the game. So, for example, some might say, when you retreat from the round, you might be forced to play another card which can hurt everybody else. Or it might say you can't even talk to your teammates for the rest of the game, which, of course, for a cooperative game, makes it so much more difficult to overcome. But I do like the kind of game arc in this game where sometimes it feels like you are in an unwinnable situation, but you might make some ground up by having a good round or two. But the general overall experience of the game is that you are struggling and it's going to be very difficult to actually win the game. So this one, again, it fits on that border of being just difficult or punishing, I suppose, but with all those added kind of punishment cards that come out and just the general nature of feeling like you're losing at all times, that's what makes me feel it's a perfect fit for a list like this. But it's quite a cool experience of a game. I'd recommend giving it a go or two, or maybe keep playing it until you actually win it. But doing so might be a long process because it is, again, extremely difficult to overcome. So that is The Grizzled at number 3. At number 2, I have the newest game on the list, which is Empire's End. Now, this is a game where you actually start with most of your points and you are trying to preserve those points as the game tries to snatch them from you. So this game has a mechanism almost identical to a game called No Thanks. So if you're familiar with that game, it's a game where you are bidding not to take punishment. So in this one, basically there'll be cards that come out which will say, if you end up winning this card or losing this card essentially, you are going to lose your 4th building in the row. And that could be a really valuable building. It could be one that you could maybe expend or not. And the way that you avoid taking them is by placing these tokens on them. And until somebody kind of passes and say, no, I'm not willing to pay any more tokens, they will take that punishment, but they'll also take all of the tokens that have been bid, putting them in a stronger position for the remainder of the game. Now, you do have some opportunities to repair the buildings that you've lost, but those opportunities are few and far between. And it's all about trying to weather the storm, knowing when you can take a hit and leaving yourself enough time to repair. The game does give you a little bit of a lifeline sometimes by when you do take these punishments. You get a bit of an engine upgrade by having little boons that tuck under your buildings, of your remaining alive buildings, basically. But again, I love the general feel of the game where you start with your points intact, and it's all about trying to keep hold of them rather than winning your points as you go. And again, this one fits that vibe of a game like Peloponnes, where the whole feel of the game is more about trying to, overcome those difficulties rather than being a game of prosperity. So that is Empire's End at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have In the Year of the Dragon by Stefan Feld. So this was immediately the first game that jumped into my mind when I thought of constructing this list. And I imagine if you played In the Year of the Dragon, you would feel the same way. So a bit like Empire's End, this is a game all about trying to weather the storm. So from the get-go, you are going to be bombarded by horrible things happening to you, such as war, famine, just general hunger, starvation. And it's all about trying to have the right skills in your tableau at the right time, or having enough food at the right time, having enough money to pay your taxes at the right time. So it's all about trying to, again, overcome these hardships. And what I like about this game, though, is that you do have such a strong degree of planning ahead, because during setup, you can see the order in which all these different threats are going to occur. You might think, well, yeah, I've got to overcome famine, I've got to overcome disease, but the war, I'm not going to be invaded for quite some time, so maybe I don't need to focus on getting my military strength up yet. I can maybe try and really focus on getting some medicine in my camp, overcome those disease, get rid of my doctors, and then get the military guys in to try and overcome these later threats. But the thing is, you don't actually get points based on overcoming the threats, you get points based on other things, meaning that any single bit of leeway that you can get to squeeze a point or two out of this game, you need to take. But of course, you have capacity in these pagodas that you're building. You can't just house people in the thin air. You need to make sure they have somewhere to live. Money in this game is extremely tight, and it can become very resource intensive to do the actions that you actually want to do, meaning that you need to focus on being first player so that you can go where you want to go, which is all in your control. But still, this is one of my favourite games of all time, despite how difficult it is to play. And it's a true game of attrition. And when you come out the other end of the game, you feel like, wow, that was quite an experience. And we got through it. But still, I love this game, and it's going to be polarising. Some people are going to find it just that a little bit too punishing, but it is the core DNA of a game like In the Year of the Dragon, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful design. So that is In the Year of the Dragon at number 1. So there we have it, that concludes the list. Hopefully you have enjoyed the video. Just maybe 1 or 2 honourable mentions, which happen to be other Stefan Feld games, because they generally come with some kind of threat that you need to overcome or suffer a punishment. There are games like Amsterdam, knowing you need to build stuff before a certain time comes around. Games like Notre Dame, Amerigo, Merlin, Aquasphere, Trajan. They seem to be a running theme in Stefan Feld games, but I think In the Year of the Dragon is just so much a bigger step above those other ones. I didn't want to have several Stefan Feld games on the same list, so I'm really happy with the way this list has turned out. Again, if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Also check out my other content too, and keep an eye out for my new game Thalamus, which will be available soon. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.